We'll wait just a couple of minutes as we're letting folks enter in the room. Thank you so much for being here today. We'll get started in just a couple minutes. Looks like we've got already 80 some folks here. It's great. Thank you all so much for being here. All right, for the sake of time, I will start us off. Thank you once again for being here with the Joint Office. Today's webinar is going to be delving into data format and preparation as a part of the final rule, which we commonly refer to as 23 CFR 680.112. So that's the specific section of the final rule that we are going to be discussing today. Just as a little bit of familiarization with Zoom, if you haven't used the Zoom functionality, the controls are located at the bottom of your screen. And so if they're not appearing, you can actually move your cursor to the bottom edge and you should be able to find specifically that Q&A function. So this is where we're hoping you will direct your questions today for today's webinar. This is a great way to make sure that the panelists can actually see your question and find it and actually respond to you directly. So please do put your questions in there. As a disclaimer, this webinar is being recorded and may be posted on the Joint Office website or used internally. And if you speak during the webinar or use your video, you are presumed to consent to recording and the use of your voice or image. So as an agenda, I'll do a short introduction, go over the intro slides for the Joint Office. So if you've been here before, I changed it a little bit. And then we will hear a presentation from our great data team discussing the data format and preparation walkthrough. And then we will save plenty of time for questions and answers. So do please feel free to put those in the Q&A function. As a bit of background, if you're not familiar with the Joint Office of Energy and Transportation, our mission is to accelerate an electrified transportation system that is affordable, convenient, equitable, reliable, and safe. And our vision is to see a future where everyone can ride and drive electric come into fruition. So we are supporting in the near term for bipartisan infrastructure law programs. We're helping to provide unifying guidance, technical assistance, and analysis, specifically for the NEVI program. So this is the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Formula Program. It's $5 billion over 5 years to build out a national EV charging network along designated alternative fuel corridors. And then we're also supporting the Charging and Fueling Infrastructure Discretionary Grant Program. This is $2.5 billion over 5 years for community and corridor grants for EV charging, as well as alternative fueling infrastructure. We're also supporting the Low No Emission Grants Program for transit bus deployment. So this is in support of low no emission transit bus deployment. And then the Clean School Bus Program, which is $5 billion in support of clean school bus deployment. So in terms of our technical assistance, we're working with states, communities, tribal nations, transit agencies, and school districts. And we are conducting one-on-one meetings with states to address questions and concerns related to the NEVI formula program. We have a great concierge service, so you can feel free to reach out to us via phone or email or our web form, which I will show what that looks like, to have your inquiry routed to the right folks at the Joint Office. And we have a lot of staff members that are supporting us as we're looking to intake all of these great questions coming in. Our website is driveelectric.gov. We have a lot of great information. It's constantly being updated, including infrastructure planning and implementation guidance, data and tools, news and events, and then our technical assistance request form. And just wanted to provide a quick reminder on some upcoming deadlines. So June 13th is the deadline for the Charging and Fueling Infrastructure Discretionary Grant Program, first round for applications. It was extended, so that one is June 13th. And then the Joint Office has a funding opportunity announcement that is out right now. This is $51 million for our Ride and Drive Electric funding opportunity. So our concept papers for this funding opportunity are due June 16th. So deadlines that are coming up, just want to make sure folks are aware. And then these are two places specifically on our website that you might want to check out. So under news and events, you can subscribe to news alerts. This is the best way to find out when program updates are out, when upcoming webinars are happening. So definitely do subscribe if you aren't already. And then this is our contact form. It's in the top right of our corner of our website. So this is where you can get in touch with us. So thank you all so much. I will now open up the polling with help from Sam. If you could launch that first polling question, that would be great. So we can make sure we know where folks are coming from. Hopefully we have addressed folks across industries. So this first question is, what sector are you coming from? So we'll just keep this open for a little while as folks respond. And then once we have a critical mass, we can feel free to close that. Great, thanks so much. So it looks like we have a lot of folks from state government, some folks from the federal and local government, as well as public sector, from non-government public sector, across also private industry. So thank you all so much for being here. We can go on to the next polling question. Great, so this one is, what region of the country are you coming from today? Just to see if we got a good mix of people across the country or international, if that applies to you. Great, looks like an awesome mix. We do have, 4 people who are international. That's very cool. Thank you all so much for taking the time, and I will now stop talking and stop sharing and pass it along to Lisa, who will go into the presentation.
All right, thanks, Bridget. Let's see. That doesn't look right. Let's try this. Are you seeing the presentation now?
Yes.
It looks all right. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. We'll just want to echo. I'm really glad everybody could join us here today. I think we had over 300 participants registered, so that's really excited. We're really glad to be here today and share out with you all what our team has been working on really hard over the past several months with some help and support from folks at Accenture Federal Services. I want to emphasize that what you hear today is not going to be the only time you're going to hear from us on this subject. As you'll learn, we have plans for moving into summer and fall and then into winter, where we're going to come back to you all and share additional progress. Today's information is focused on the data format itself and the preparation of the data. We'll be coming back later to talk about data submission process and then how to utilize the data platform as we get closer to launch date. So here today I have myself, Lisa Myers. I come from the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. I have been with the Joint Office since we started, where I am serving as the interim lead for the data and analysis team. And here today with me, I have Joanne Zhao from Argonne National Lab, Jean Chu from Idaho National Lab, and Ashley Weiss from NREL. So these folks are also all on detail assignment with the Joint Office and supporting the work on EV Chart, which is what you're here today to hear about. Joanne and Jean are both going to present some of the content, and Ashley is in the background helping to answer some of our technical questions. So if you have any of those questions, go ahead and pop those in the Q&A, and we'll try to address those as we go. Wanted to let you know that we're focusing, or our agenda for today. Let's see. Go ahead and try to advance that. So Joanne's going to walk us through an overview of EV Chart. So EV Chart stands for the EV Charging Analytics and Reporting Tool. And this is what the Joint Office was tasked to help develop in support of 23 CFR 680 and specifically Section 112, which we'll talk about. And then Jean's going to walk through the 2 documents that we published towards the end of May, just a couple of weeks ago, which is the data input template and the format preparation guide, which is the narrative guide that accompanies that document. Then we're going to walk through sort of next steps, where we're headed from here, and including some opportunities for engagement with a couple targeted groups that we're looking to reach out to. And then we have our Q&A at the end, and we have saved a lot of time for Q&A so we can answer as many questions as possible. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Joanne.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you everyone for your time today. So the following slides, I will give you a quick introduction of the EV Chat, and Jean Chu will follow my presentation to give you details introduction about the data platform, data dictionary, and the preparation guidance we released 2 weeks ago. So the Joint Office of Energy and Transportation is developing the electric vehicle charging analytic and reporting tool called EV Chat, which will provide a centralized hub for collecting and analyze electric vehicle charging infrastructure data directly by the Federal Highway Administration We know this is a 23 CFR 680. The purpose here is to really reduce the burden on the states, the charging provider, and other stakeholders who are responsible for the data submission. EV chart will include the one-time submission, annual submission, and the quarterly data submissions required in the 680.112 data submission. So the objective here, again, is to, because it's a centralized data platform, we want to really streamline and standardize the data submission process. We will integrate a set of reporting and analytical capabilities to help with future program evaluation and design. We will empower data sharing across different stakeholders. And also we want to connect with other databases and tools, such as an alternative field data center for your further analysis needs. Next slide, please. So EVChat will be a web-based data submission portal and analytical platform that will enable data submission, curation, and consumption by different stakeholders. It is designed for all the funding recipients and their sub-recipient and the contractors under the Title 23 federal funding programs. For example, the user who can submit the data include but may not limited to the states, the charging network provider, the charging station host, and the construction contractors. When the data is submitted, EVChat will ensure the data security and check the data quality, and then provide the reporting and analytical capabilities to inform future program management, design, and improvement. Data in EVChat will be accessible by federal agencies, state and local government, and others, as directed by the Joint Office of Energy and Transportation. Aggregated and normalized data will be shared with public dashboard. Please note that the third-party data sharing through API and the 23 CFR 680.106 and 116 will not be included in EVChat. And we can talk about this more if there's questions in the Q&A. Next slide, please. Data to be submitted to EVChat are required by the 23 CFR 680.112 data submittal A to C. There's a one-time submission of a capital and installation cost data, as well as the annual and quarterly data submission of post-installation operational data. Please note this is only in a summary of the specific data field. We will discuss the specific data field, the data format and requirement in later slides when we walk through the data input template and the data format preparation guidance. Please also note that March 1st, 2024 is the initial deadline for data submission. Next slide. So what data will be, what projects are required to submit data to EVChat? So basically all NEVI formula program project, as well as the project for the construction of publicly accessible EV chargers that are funded with funds made available under 23 USC are required to submit operational data by quarter and by year. This project those projects include any EV charging infrastructure project funded with federal funds that is treated as a project on the federal aid highway. NEVI program, formula program project and grant awarded under 23 USC 151F are required to submit a one-time capital and installation expenditure data. This project are for EV charging station located along and designed to serve the users of a designated alternative fuel corridors. Next slide, please. So what will EVChat be available? I already see some questions in chat about this. So we released our data format guidance about 2 weeks ago. Right now, we are having the first webinar focused on this data format preparation guidance. We can answer any questions about our guidance and data format to be submitted. During the summertime, we want to start user group engagement with a focus on the state agency users first. We'll also have an industry feedback group form, and we have a later slide to talk about the details about that. In the fall time that we like to start onboarding pilot users. So the pilot users will start to test the data platform and submit some mock data to the platform, help us to refine the data platform characteristics. In the same time, we will have the second webinar focused on the data submission process. After that, in December, we'll start early data submission process. Some of the states we understand already have their RFI in place, and some of the chargers could be installed and start operation by the end of this calendar year. So we'll issue guidance for those stations to submit the data before EV charge come online. In February 2024, that's the time we expect to launch EV Chat officially. And at the same time, we'll have the third webinar focused on EV Chat tutorial, walks through how you could use the platform to submit the data, visualize the data, and doing analytical reporting capabilities. After the release, we'll still provide technical assistance to any questions about using our data platform. Next slide, please. So with that, I will transition to Jean to talk about the dictionary and preparation guidance. Thanks.
Thanks, Joanne. So the first document we published for EV chart is the data format and preparation guide and data input template. So this is our effort to provide a standardized structure to the data that's being required in 680.112. And so those are the data that will be collected by submitted to EV charge. So we take the those two documents currently available on driveelectric.gov under data analysis tool. And so we take the required data that's being required in the 680.112 and then structure that into an input template as an Excel spreadsheet that's also including the data dictionary in there, including all the data field that's supposed to be submitted to EV charge. And then along with this document, we have the data format and preparation guidance that provide more explanation and guidance on how to prepare and use this data input template. Next slide. And so in the input template, so there's a total of 10 tabs you can find in this input template document. The first tab is the data dictionary. That's a summary of all the data and providing the definition of what are this data about and accepting values and which including examples of what this data field should be look like. And then there's also reporting and constraint information. I'll explain that later in the slide. And then so in this examples, there are different modules providing, and after the data dictionary, there are a total of 9 modules that structured with different categories of data being required in 680.112. Next slide, please. So the 9 modules are including the first one, station location and charging station sessions. The third one is uptime. Fourth one is outreach, and fifth one, maintenance cost information, and then station operator identity information. And the 7th module is station operator programs. The 6th one is distributed energy resource information, and the last one is the capital and installation cost. So as you can see here, so different modules will have, based on where they are in 680.112, they have different frequency of submission. And then, so here is just a list of some examples of what are the attributes including in those modules. This is not an exhaustive list. And then, so within this different module, so the module is being categorized in the way in terms of their frequency of submission and also the type of information that's being required for different modules. The next slide, please. So here's an example of one of the modules. This is module 4 outage. So in module 4 outage is supposed to collect the data related to the outage duration, and that thing also including which station that's the outage duration is related to, the port, and then the outage ID, which is daytime, so which is the starting time of the outage. And then the last column here is the outage duration in minutes. Next. So when you fill this information, next slide. So when you fill this information in the input template, you can see here there's a identifier of the station ID where this outage happened, and then which port this outage is associated with. And then the outage ID is the daytime, the starting daytime of this particular outage. And then the information related to the duration of the outage. So that's so for each field should be filled out in this input in template, and then the reservoir module is structured in a similar way. Next slide, please. So more information you can find in the data format and preparation guidance that provide you information on the submission frequencies, what kind of data type, and then the reporting requirement and the primary key information. So here for the data submission frequency, there are 3 different types of frequency that Joanne has mentioned earlier. So the one-time data is required by all, so it's only required for the Title 23 projects that on the designated alternative fuel corridor. So those are for the corridor projects. Can we move back to the previous slide? So that's for the corridor. So the one-time data submission is only for the corridor project. And then that including the station location information, station operator ID, DER information, capital, and installation cost. And they are only submitted one time for each station. And then for the annual and quarterly data, so the annual data including the maintenance cost, station operator program, they are submitted on or before the March 1st each year. And for the quarter data, that including the charging session data, uptime and outage gate data, they should be submitted at the end of each calendar quarter. So here we define the calendar quarter, January to March would be the first quarter, and so on and so forth. Next slide, please. And in the data preparation guidance, you can also find different data types that being included in the data submission. So there are a total of 5 different types of data. The first one is string with limited, so with unlimited maximum characters or with a defined maximum length. So for this example, the station state is structured as string with limited of 2 characters. So that means IL will be used for Illinois. And for daytime data type, so that's reporting as in year, month, date, hours, minutes, and seconds. So those data should be reported in coordinated universal time or UTC. And then for the decimal data, so we defined in the data dictionary, we'll define the maximum number of digits permitted and then the length of the decimal place required. And there's also some data that's in Boolean, which means it's a true or false related to data such like whether or there's a distribution energy resource on site. So that would be a true or false data reporting. And the last data type is integer or the integer X. So that's including the numerical number that's greater or equals to 0. And then we have X to specify the maximum value that can be reported. For example, the program reporting year, that's an integer 4, which means there should be 4 digits for the calendar year. Next slide, please. And then in the data preparation guidance, there's also explanation on what's the difference between required data and the recommended data. So the required data are data that's actually being required in CFR 680-112. And then, so recommended data that's not directly called out in CFR 680-112, but we are highly encourage you to include those data because those are the data we think will be enhanced the program evaluation and analysis. So those data should be submitted with the required data in the input template. And then there's also the last one I want to explain here is the primary key constraint. So for each modules, we identify unique identifiers with one or more than one primary keys that allowed us to uniquely identify a single record. For example, in module 4, the outage information. So the information there is trying to identify individual outage. And then so that required the primary key as the station ID, the port ID, and outage ID to uniquely identify a single outage. And the reported data will be the duration of that outage. So the station ID and port ID you can see here is used repeatedly as primary key, and then station ID and port ID should never be changed or modified or renamed during the program. And then in the 680.112, there's also specified that station ID and port ID must be the same as the data that's being available through third-party API. That's in 680.116. Next slide. So now I'll shift it back to Joanne.
Okay, thank you, Jane. As we mentioned, we will start engaging the different user groups in the next 1 to 2 months during the summertime. So what to expect next? We like to form a state agency pilot group. And if you're interested in participating in the group, please contact Ashley through the email listed on the website. So the group will be able to provide feedback on our functionality and user experience for the tool. You will be able to test the data submission process by providing mock data. We'll like to get your feedback on how we can refine the capability of the tool, especially the analytical capability and the usability of the tool. You will be asked to participate in a group or individual discussions with the joint office. We already have several states indicate their interest in participating in the pilot group. Please let us know if you're interested to join us, and we'll start the pilot group conversation soon. Next slide. So after forming the state agency pilot group, we also like to engage with industry partners. So the industry partner, we specifically focus on the agency, the entities that who will submit the data, who will be responsible for submitting the data for your state or for your direct funding recipient. So in this group, likely you will also provide the feedback on the functionality and user experience of the tool, test the data submission process, and provide a mock data later on. However, in this setup, although we are still in the development of how we want to engage with the industry partner, but likely you will be participating in individual discussion with the joint office. So any industry partners, if you're going to be responsible to submit the data, please contact Ashley again through the same email listed on the website if you're interested to join our pilot group. So what to expect next? So additional guidance will be published. So now we published our data preparation and data dictionary guidance. Next time we'll publish the data submission process in the fall. So that submission process will include, for example, the requirements on the file size, file type, and a method for you to submit information. And also in early 2024, we will have the third webinar focused on how to use the EV chat platform when we release the platform to everyone. We'll have, so again, additional webinar focused on those 2 items will be in fall and early next year. And if you're interested to know the information about the upcoming webinar or technical assistance information, please sign up to receive updates on driveelectric.gov. Next slide, please. Okay, with that, back to Lisa.
Great, thank you all so much. I know Lisa and team have provided a lot of great answers. If you look at the Q&A function, you can also click to the answered ones. But some of them might warrant talking a little bit more about as well. I know that we have gotten a few questions on if this tool can be used outside of NEVI projects, outside of Title 23 projects. Some folks have asked about kind of other federal funded projects like the Clean School Bus Program or even other state agency funded charging projects. So yeah, I was wondering if
Yeah, I'll take that one. Super excited that there's a lot of interest and acknowledging that folks might be interested in that. As of right now, we're funded for this specific purpose to support implementation of FHWA's 23 CFR 680. However, you know, we all on this call are super interested in data. That's what our background is and interest area. And so something that we'll just put a pin in for now. It's noted that there is this interest, but the purpose for EV Chart at this point is specifically for those Title 23 funded programs.
Got it. Thank you. And I know Lisa did provide a nice answer for this and see that there's kind of one more that also speaks to it. But folks are wondering if data submissions are expected to be handled manually through this data input template, or if there will be some sort of automated data submission method. Some folks noted maybe like the limitation on the number of rows in an Excel spreadsheet, that type of thing.
Yeah, so as we mentioned, this is just the first step, right? Our next step is really that process piece that the several questions have been asked about. So of course, our goal is to try to accommodate as many methods as we can so that we can be really inclusive of how the information comes to us. But those are all the detailed design architectural questions that we're sorting through right now as we're developing this system. And as part of the reason why we want to have these pilot stakeholder groups that we reach out to folks, because we're trying to make sure that we do this in a really thoughtful way. So cannot answer that question definitively at this point, but know that we are trying to figure out how we could accommodate many different avenues for submission of the data.
Great. One question came in asking about if there's any plan or possible mechanism to get outage or reliability data for the already existing charging ports, or ports that are installed by other types of entities.
Yeah, so this is kind of a two-part question. So one is, I would say that like EV Chart is being set up for the new stations that are being funded with Title 23 program funds, right? So if it's an existing station that has no new funding associated with it, then as of right now, our system is not being designed to support that. There is the reliability webinar happening on Thursday, right, Bridget? Where
Yeah.
I believe there will be some discussion around that topic. So that might be another opportunity to chime in and get some more information there. But as of right now, EV Chart will not be designed to accommodate existing stations reliability information.
One question came in asking if others can join this pilot group beyond the state government contacts.
Yeah, so
Right.
yeah, we primarily focus on the state agency who will be responsible for the data submission, and you can designate your sub-recipient or contractor who will submit the data. However, in this pilot group, we want to focus on the state agencies. And if you already selected a contractor or consulting firm representing you for data submission, please send the request to the same email listed on the website, sorry, on the slide, and we will include them based on our evaluation.
Okay, great. Yeah, maybe, I don't know if Ashley's back there, but if you want to drop the email that folks should reach out to, that would be great. One question was asking about if there could be further clarification kind of on what data will be open for everyone. I know, Joanne, you had listed kind of like the specific parts of the final rule that are not going to be part of the EV Chart data as well. But yeah, maybe some further discussion on kind of what types of data will be publicly accessible.
Yeah, I can take this one too. So again, just bringing in the distinction that this is being set up for 23 CFR 681.12, which has some very specific data fields. And as directed by that regulation, the data is to be aggregated and anonymized. So anything that is made publicly available will be aggregated and anonymized. That's the information that's within EV Chart. We are sorting through right now. That's some of the other discussion that we're having around what should those dashboards look like? What should those analytic capabilities do? How can we make it as open as possible while still honoring that requirement that we aggregate and anonymize the data? So we are sorting through what the different permissions levels and viewability is and the whole sort of structure of that right now. So will it be open for everyone? Not all data will be open for everyone to see, but we will make data available to the public. As far as section 116 goes, again, EV Chart is not directly collecting that data. That's data that is required to be made available to third-party entities via API. So again, EV Chart will not be directly collecting that information.
Okay. This is probably in a similar vein. One person asked that many states have been approached by universities and colleges for access to charging data. Will states be able to point to this tool for data requests from these types of groups?
That's a great suggestion and something that we need to consider, and part of the reason why we want to hear directly from the states about that. So we need to understand what those interests are and then figure out how we can try to accommodate those kinds of things. Understanding that there is going to be some limitations on what's viewable.
Right.
In accordance with the regulation.
Great. This is a more specific question. If a charger needs to be replaced at any point, would it use the same charger ID as the prior one, or would it get issued a new charger ID? So replacement of a charger.
Great question. Someone else want to take that?
Yeah, I would let Jean take that one. We discussed it before. Yeah, go ahead.
So I think it depends on what kind of situation it is. I think supposedly the charging station ID will remain the same, and then so the charger ID charger it depends on if it's the same station. If it's the same station, the station ID should remain the same when the equipment got replaced, and then so that's a different ID number. So the station ID should remain the same. But if there's by any chance this station completely being replaced and then there's a new ID number being available on the third-party API, so that number should be updated on our database because those two databases by the rule needs to be aligned. So whatever is published in the third-party API should be the same station ID on our platform.
Okay, gotcha. So you're also making the distinction there between kind of the charger itself and maybe the charging station. So you
So
might have a
there
bunch of chargers.
potentially will be equipment replacement on site, but then the station ID should remain the same if it's just a replacement of equipment.
Gotcha. One question came in about kind of the quality control, quality assurance protocols. So what will these types of protocols look like? Will there be any sort of data submitter auditing?
Yeah, again, as Lisa indicated earlier, so we are still in the process of designing the platform and the structure. So back to the data verification, we will use, for example, the data guidance we just released. So we have a table showing the data schema, basically the data type, and also acceptable range of the values. So the first step of this platform going to check the data value and the data type. And again, we will still working on the data platform development. We will have more guidance later on for the verification process.
And this might be kind of a similar answer since a lot of things are still in the works. But one question is, what types of security are in place to protect the information that's being shared?
Yep. So I'll start with that. So first of all, this is being built in the DOE environment and will follow and being built in a cloud hosting environment with certain security protocols that are in place. And so we are building this system in accordance with the policies and protocols that are already in place for building this kind of system within the DOE environment. So we can probably provide more details later, but there is going to be some specific security features. And I don't know if Jean or Joanne, you want to add, elaborate on that?
Yeah, I think just to add that we'll make sure that only the anonymized and the public and the aggregated data is available for public view. However, for the funding recipient, the direct funding recipient, you will be able to see your own data, and we'll work with you to make sure that the data is within the platform. As long as they are not aggregated or anonymized, that should not be seen by the public. And this will be regulated. This will be controlled by a joint office working with the funding recipient together.
And I'll just add on the QA/QC question, really great question about protocols for QA/QC of the data. So ultimately, the state agencies or direct funding recipients are responsible for the data submission, but we are intending to build into the user experience or the portal, the ability for a state to review and accept or reject data that has been submitted. So we are trying to plan to build in some of those functionality, as well as being able to flag data that doesn't look right. So we're trying to figure out how much of those functions we can accommodate in the system right now.
Right. This is another specific question. Thinking kind of about the station versus the chargers that are at that station location, and wondering about how to represent the latitude and longitude of the grouping. Is it that you use one of the chargers in the station location? Is it kind of the central point between those charging stations?
I can answer that. So for the lat long of that information, is just point to the specific station, and station is defined as a group of chargers. So any location that direct drivers to that group of chargers will work. So which means you can pinpoint just one, and then the rest of the charger is supposed to be just next to each other. So that's kind of we consider as a station. So we don't so the lat long should be at one point of that group of charger should work.
Sounds good. This question, if the system isn't compatible with existing stations, can existing stations be considered NEVI compliant if they can't submit data to this portal?
Yeah, so if there's any Title 23 federal funding utilized, then it would be, the station would be required to submit data to EV chart. As to whether or not an existing station could submit data to EV chart, I think that's something we're still sorting through. We're trying to figure out how we could sort of separate out stations that have received the specific federal funding from stations that have not. So I don't want to say it's not going to be possible. It's just that we're designing the system to accommodate first and foremost the stations that are funded with that federal funding.
For new NEVI.
So any new net funds that were used.
Looks like we've gone through a lot of these questions. Will EV chart maintain uniqueness of station IDs when station IDs are being generated for multiple states or charging providers? So thinking about, Georgia versus Ohio, station 1 and 2, how to make sure each station has its own unique string, I guess.
Yeah, so that's the things we're currently working on. So we expect the direct funding recipient, when they register EV chart, to use the data plan form and designate their contractor to submit the data. They need to provide with us the station ID. And that station ID need to be unique and also need to be consistent across the modules. If there's a case that you think the station ID will be the same in other projects and other states, and I think that's a scenario we need to consider. We need to take that question back and discuss how we sort out that situation. At least I don't know whether you want to add.
No, that's fine.
And one thing to mention, the data being submitted, including station ID, will also involve in so we will also know where the station is at which state. So there will be a way to distinguish that. And also alternative fuel data center has unique station ID for all the stations in the country. So there will be a way for us to distinguish those stations, even there's a potential of duplicated station ID being used in different states. But we will have to consider that and figure out how to do to streamline that process.
Great. So this question is kind of an estimate around the number of ports that might end up using this platform on a quarterly basis. So from kind of the data management side of things, just wondering, how much data might be received.
It's great question. Probably the two biggest questions we get asked is when is the first station going to be reporting data and how many stations are there going to be? We don't really have a great sense of that right now. It's totally going to depend on, all of the NEVI state plans and when those stations get installed and how many there are, and then all the CFI grants that are being considered right now, as well as other Title 23 funded programs. So it's a little up in the air. I mean, we have sort of huge magnitude type questions that we're trying to answer, but I don't have a specific answer for that right now.
This is another good in the weeds question. So in the data template includes the field for session error for charging sessions. And this person's wondering that charging session errors can happen at the same time as a session, but they're not directly associated with sessions according to the OCPP protocols. So I think essentially he's wondering where to find specific information if people have questions, kind of wondering about specific fields where they should be directed.
So I think we're going to look into that, what kind of scenario we're looking at here. In the rule is mentioning, is basically saying providing error code when for a failed charging session. So it's supposed to be linked to a specific charging session that's being failed and what's the error code associated with that failure. So, but I can look in, so we will look into the specific cases and then to see what's prescribed in the OCPP 1.6J.
Right, yeah, and I would imagine too, if this person wants to submit this to our contact form, it might be a good one to have just in our intake, so that I can put a link to that in the chat as well, but that's the Drive Electric /contact. If you have specific questions, we could probably keep track of them that way too. One question that came in, are there plans to finalize the recommended values for certain fields included on tables in the guide?
Yeah, great question. So, the required fields are those that are required per the federal regulation. The recommended fields are fields that we joint office feel would help enable greater depth of analysis with the data that's being submitted. So they are not required in order to be submitted in accordance with the regulation, but those are fields that we, with our professional judgment, feel are fields that would help enrich the data and analysis that's coming in. So in terms of being finalized, they're final in the way that they're being presented, but they're just recommended. They're not required data fields, if that makes sense.
Yep. This question that came in.
I should just say, and we strongly encourage people to fill out the recommended data fields.
Nice, yeah,
But again, not required per the regulation.
Gotcha. BC recommended and have the time. Seems like a great thing to fill out. This one question came in more about tracking the different plan open and close dates. I think this might also be for kind of the requests for proposals. This is a great question and one I would also encourage submitting to our contact form. We can get you some more information about tracking those plans. This question came in about the lag time for data entry. How many days, months after the quarter ends? I guess thinking about when is the data going to be submitted? And
yeah, also a great question. This came up just the other day in another conversation we were having. So I think this is a question we will answer after we have a chance to coordinate with FHWA on this and make sure that there's no planning things that we need to be aware of. So that's something that'll be covered when we talk about the submission process. So in future guidance.
This question, is there any thought to identify a standard API for states provider data that will be made available to third-party software developers? So I guess is there a standard API?
No, I know there's a lot of interest in this as well. So the joint office right now is sorting through that and determining whether and how we can provide some guidance on that. So I think that's just one that's TBD.
Okay.
Understand the need and interest in having something like that. So we're working on that.
Gotcha. And one question came in asking kind of about, how long do folks need to submit this type of data? How long, or I guess when will the data submission period end for this process?
Also a great question. So, the program funds are for 5 years of O&M. So in theory, the system should be up and running for at least 5 years after the last federal dollar is spent. And I think that within the DOE, we have interest in sort of a much greater longevity of the system as well. So I think these are all things that are being debated right now in terms of the requirement. It's associated with the program funding, which has the 5-year O&M stipulation. Beyond that, we would like to see a life beyond that within the DOE, but those details have not been sorted out at this point in time.
This is a good question. If you submit, so we were talking about kind of the recommended values. So if you submit a recommended section 1 quarter, are you required then to constantly submit that same data field? Or is it, for that reporting period if you have the data?
If I under the quarterly data is quarterly for that particular station and session level data. So each time you have to submit the data, it's for the previous 3 quarters, right, Jean? You can correct me if I'm
Yeah,
wrong.
I think the
Yeah.
question is related to if they, in this quarter, they added some of the recommended session data in there,
I
but
see.
next quarter they don't submit that, is that okay?
Mhm. Yeah, so like
Because it's
charging it was-
recommended, it's kind of like, ideally, we wanted to receive that constantly, but then if
Right.
that's the case, we only receive that for 1 quarter and not the next one. It's recommended, so it's not a requirement.
Yeah, but we still encourage people to submit on a frequency that recommended.
I mean, from analysis point of view, it's definitely, and the program evaluation is definitely more valuable or to have that information constantly received.
Makes sense. So this is a question again on uptime. What's the difference between uptime and kind of an outage module is how it's phrased? Seems that the uptime module already contains the outage data. So I guess these are the 9 modules you all have listed. How to understand, I guess, the difference between those ones.
So yes, so the outage is just associated, like in particular, so the outage module is trying to capture every single outage events we have. So it's trying to capture the duration of the outage. And then, so it's by the outage event. For example, the discharging station is down for 3 days. So that's the thing we come to capture here. But the uptime is trying to calculate a percentage of how frequent, a percentage of like how much time this charging station is being available and operated. So that's a percentage of like total year within the year, how much percentage of the time this charger is being available. So it's trying to capture 2 different things. One is capture how long each outage lasts. Is it 1 minute outage or is a 5 days outage? The uptime is just trying to capture, in terms of like the reliability point of view, how reliable in terms of the percentage of uptime for this particular charger. So it's trying to capture 2 different kind of information, even they are all associated with a downtime of a station or a port.
Right. Yeah, and it looks like there's definitely a lot of great information both in the template and in the guidance document. So hopefully more specificity there too to hopefully consult with. It looks like we went through all of our questions. I know I kind of threw them out there fast and furiously. So if there aren't any more, I can close us out. Does the team have any parting thoughts on EV Chart before we transition?
No, just thank you for your time today, and please feel free to send us questions through driveelectric.gov. We really do try to consider all of those and respond when we can. So that's a great way to have any questions that didn't get answered here today answered by us moving forward. And just again, to re-emphasize, this is not the last time you'll be hearing from us. We plan to reach back out as soon as we have more information to share related to the submission process. And then again, for how to use the system once we get closer to having it ready to launch. So
yeah. And also please help us to improve the data platform by joining our pilot group, both the state agencies and the industry partners.
Awesome. Yeah, Lisa, actually, if you want to stop sharing your screen, I just have a couple additional, no, you're okay. I just have a couple additional slides to show what webinars are coming up. So folks know to be aware, be on the lookout. We just have 2 on the books right now. So the next one is going to be ensuring a reliable charging experience, actually happening this Thursday. So hopefully if you have more questions on uptime and thinking about cybersecurity as well, those topics will be addressed. And then we also are going to have a webinar on workforce development in the EV charging industry. So please do check that out and subscribe to the news alert so you can get apprised of when the webinars are happening as soon as possible. And yeah, like Lisa said, please do feel free. There's that driveelectric.gov/contact. If you have specific questions that you want to make sure get captured, and we can get back to you as soon as we can. But thank you all so much for attending today, and hope to see you at another joint office webinar soon.
thank you.
Thank you all. Thanks so much.
Bye.